And welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Duraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And today we're going to get into Beat the Waiver Wire. So these are guys that you should add looking forward. And as guys go on to IR, hopefully you're moving guys down into those slots, or going out, I should say, move guys down into those slots, open up some roster space that you didn't necessarily have earlier in the week and that you could use now to pick up some of these guys that we're going to talk about. Format today, we're going to talk about a player that's maybe a little bit more owned, so maybe not available in your leagues, and then guys that should be more available that are significantly less rostered. And we're going to start with quarterbacks now. So the first player we're going to get into is Daniel Jones. He is currently quarterback 20. But we did start to see him get dropped in a couple of my leagues anyways that are playing with superflex, and he's only 15% rostered, so that feels like a pretty low roster percentage even for superflex, and he's been pretty good with Malik Nabers. I mean, it's hard to deny that Nabers has made his floor a lot higher, and Nabers isn't going to play this week, so maybe Daniel Jones owners kind of saw that and either are going to bench him or have dropped him, in search of either higher upside players on the waiver wire, because this was a big waiver wire week, or just, concerned that he's maybe not going to be so good this week or next week type of thing. So overall, though, we do think Daniel Jones is going to be a decent option for you moving forward. His passing has kind of elevated his floor, and, he still has the rushing ability. He hasn't been taking off quite as much, but I think over the second half of the year, that could be elevated. And in this game specifically, without Devin Singletary, he could be in for a decent amount of rushing against Seattle.
And next week, they've got the Cincinnati Bengals, who are an awful defense. They're going to be playing from behind in that one as well. So in Superflex, quarterback wire is very thin. So if Daniel Jones is out there, he's someone I would definitely be stashing for next week, assuming you need quarterback help.
And going down to the guy that's probably significantly more owned, 8%, is Joe Flacco. This week, we did just hear news on Friday that he took the majority of the first team snaps in this practice. So it was reported that Anthony Richardson should probably be good to go, but I think it's looking like they're going to end up giving him a week off. So if you are in a Superflex league against Jacksonville, Joe Flacco is probably going to be a top 15 quarterback. This is somebody that you should be scooping and starting for this week. So the looking forward outlook for him obviously isn't as good, but just in case Richardson does miss an additional game, they get Tennessee next week, and he will be a top 15 option again against Tennessee if he is able to continue to start. Again, that definitely depends on Richardson's injury, but Flacco, another guy that if you have a spot, get him onto your roster.
Yeah, in general, we don't think about quarterbacks and having their handcuffs, but I would say this is the one case with Anthony Richardson that I would be having Flacco on my roster if I was a Richardson owner, even if he is good to go in week 5 and week 6, just the way he plays and the potential to get banged up, you want to ensure you protect yourself. And we saw Flacco last year with the Browns, how well he stepped in and performed. We saw it last week. He put up 15 fantasy points after Richardson got knocked out. So definitely make a point to get him on your team if you are a Richardson owner, because in Superflex, you drafted him second round, third round, maybe first, depending on, how aggressive your league mates push up quarterbacks. So definitely protect that investment.
Going on to the running back position. So we got 4 guys we're going to talk about here, and 2 of them are much higher percent rostered, and we did talk about them in start sit. And then we're going to have 2 lower guys, including one who's on IR and is probably owned nowhere. So the first guy we're going to talk about is Antonio Gibson. There was news after Rhmondre fumbled in 4 straight games that he's going to possibly get the chance to start. And even if he isn't going to start, I think that there's a possibility that he expands his snap share in a big way here. He has not topped 37% of the snaps yet, and he really has been kind of relegated to a backup role and every once in a while in the passing game. We did see last week he had a breakout passing game play where he had 45-yard play, I think it was, ended up with 67 yards in that game. So from a roster perspective, if you have Rhmondre, you definitely want to try and get Gibson on your team. But just even if you don't, throw him on the end of your bench. This is somebody that's currently 44% rostered that should probably be 100% rostered with how banged up the running back position is currently. And if this is going to be a role moving forward that he gets to keep, it's something that I do think he could be very successful in because he is a good pass catcher as well.
Yeah, he's as electric as a pass catcher. And I think even if Rhmondre continues to hold on to that rushing role first and second down, they can bring him in more on third down. Their offensive line is so bad that he's going to probably get a lot of those dump off passes from Brissett.
And the next guy we're going to talk about that also is very highly owned compared to the other guys that we're going to talk about here at 53% is Alexander Mattison. We just got news that Zamir White is doubtful for the game. I wasn't even really aware he was hurt, so I'm not sure entirely what's going on there. But obviously, Mattison has been trending as the better running back just in general, even though he's been getting less touches. So if he is full go against Denver this week and is going to get all the work, I do think that there's an entire possibility that he just takes the job this week if Zamir's going to be out. So look for him on your wires. Again, 53% rostered, so he's probably picked up in a lot of competitive leagues or deep bench leagues. But even if he's not in your league, this is somebody that I personally think should be 100% rostered at this point, with the fact that he's going to get this start and that he could look extremely good in a way that he doesn't give the role back to Zamir White.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to look worse than Zamir White has. And I know that was their game plan going into the year, was to pound White, and he looked great at the end of the last year, and it didn't work out. And so now it's time to kind of go with the hot hand. So, unfortunate to see any guy miss time with injury, but I think now is the time to pick up Mattison.
Next guy on this list is Tyrone Tracy. He's only 13% rostered, so the chance that he's available in your league is very high. Again, unless you're in a dynasty league or unless you're in a very, very deep bench league, he should be available. And we do know now that Devin Singletary is doubtful for this week. So this is, again, something where as the featured back, he could shine here a little bit. And Singletary had a bad game last week. Tracy is a very good pass catcher, not necessarily the biggest guy to run between the tackles or anything. He's 5'11", 210. So he can do it. He has that skill set. He was very good in college. But overall, this is a game where if he does produce very well, we could start to see more of a 50-50 split between the two running backs. I do think next year, this is probably going to be more of his backfield than Singletary's. And so this could be kind of a springboard week for him. Next week, we mentioned it with Daniel Jones. He gets Cincinnati, very beatable on the ground. So again, if Singletary's injury lingers or if he just looks very good, this is somebody that could help bolster your running back group moving forward this season.
Yeah, and Tyrone Tracy didn't start playing running back until his senior year. He was a converted wide receiver, and he was still a fourth-round pick as a running back, which kind of shows the upside that the Giants see in him. Aside from Singletary, coming back or how banged up he is, assuming the Giants are kind of out of it toward the latter half of the year, there's a good chance they continue to give this guy the ball just to see what they have as a running back as part of their future.
Last guy amongst the running backs that we're going to talk about here is Audric Estime. I do think at 6% rostered, there's like a very, very, very high chance he's available. And he is currently still on IR. So, with that ankle injury, he isn't going to play this week, right? This is going to be the fourth week he's going to miss. But with the way that they were trying to get Bidet kind of involved before he got hurt last week, there is a chance that they decide just to kind of go with Estime here in the backfield. I know Javonte ended up looking pretty good last week, so maybe he kind of picks up a little bit more momentum going into this week. I know that they play the Raiders, so that makes it very, very possible that Javonte has a big week. Maybe he gets in the end zone and actually has 4 or 5 yards of carry, something like that. But Estime is a very big back. He's like 230, so this is somebody that could play a significant role in the goal line. We saw them go away from Javonte on the goal line in favor of McLaughlin even. So if he gets the short yardage role kind of quickly here and then ends up kind of taking over the second half of the year, because this is a rookie that, they kind of liked, this coaching staff actually drafted. So take a look here. And again, not somebody that's necessarily going to be owned, somebody you can stash in IR this week if your roster is looking bleak, even if you have an open spot, consider Estime.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add too. If you do have an open IR spot, just grab them, throw them on there for the time being. And I wonder how much of that 4% own are Notre Dame alumni. Be curious to see if Sleeper could put something like that out. But he was a very good, productive college running back. He was kind of like one of the highest rated PFF guys, if you're into that sort of thing. But like we mentioned when we did the Broncos preview show, when we were talking about Javonte Williams and this backfield, we were a little bit hesitant about Javonte with the idea that Estime was going to kind of be that goal line bruising back. And like you said, with 230 pounds, right now they cannot run the ball effectively. So they're just kind of trying everything. So I would expect him to get more than a fair share of opportunity once he does return from injury.
Going down to the wide receivers now, we got 3 names for you here. The first one is obvious in a layup. It's Josh Downs. He's 49% rostered, so there's probably a good chance he's not available in your leagues. But he did just have kind of a breakout game, right? He came in to the season with a high ankle sprain that he suffered during training camp, missed the first 2 weeks. But then his first game back in week 3, he did lead the team in targets, tied with Pittman with 5, even though they only threw it 20 times. So not a great game in week 3. But in week 4, once Flacco took over, it was very obvious that Downs was back. He looked healthy. I think that's kind of the most important part here. 8 for 82 and a touchdown in that game. So again, not entirely likely that he's available, but if you're putting guys into IR and he's the top wide receiver option on the waiver wire, go and get him. He should be closer to 75% roster in my opinion.
And Downs is a very, very good underrated receiver. I know camp this year, he was being talked about as their best, receiving weapon. We saw even that rapport he had with Anthony Richardson in their short stint last year. So I think he's kind of just too talented of a player overall to be on waivers.
Yeah, sometimes you just want a good player. And Downs is like a very good player, just in general, right?
Yeah.
Like forget fantasy for a second. He's an excellent receiver. He's down the field receiver too. We've seen that Richardson is like, he has a higher completion percentage on throws 20 yards down the field than he does behind the line of scrimmage. And that's where Downs excels. So I do think even with Richardson in a way that maybe it's not like that for Pittman, like Downs should be able to still be a decent bye week fill-in and give you some upside in the way that you just don't normally find on the waiver wire. So again, 75% roster should be more of the sweet spot for him. And I think as he continues to perform, come back from injury, maybe he shows a little rapport with Richardson down the field, and then that will follow. So if you get ahead of that, that's definitely something that we advise that you do. The second receiver that we're going to be talking about here is about to undergo a role change. Well, I mean, it kind of happened last week already, so it's kind of already in progress. And that's Tre Tucker for the Raiders. So obviously, Adams is looking to get traded. I don't think he's playing for the Raiders anymore. So this is somebody that is going to be the number 2 receiving or the number 2 wide receiver. I shouldn't say receiving option because they do have Brock Bowers. But I do think he showed in week 3, even with Adams, 9 catches. He had 96 yards and a touchdown. Last week, more difficult matchup against Cleveland, but he still had 5 for 40. He had a rushing touchdown, so they are looking to get him the ball in more creative ways. But that's back-to-back double-digit points, right? 19 and 12. Without Adams, I think that he is going to continue to be involved in the offense in a big way. He's only 35% rostered. Again, this is somebody that should probably be 75% rostered, and I think could find his way into your lineups in good matchups, especially with a lot of bye weeks. So they get Denver this week, and I do think that Surtain's going to be matched up against Jacoby Myers. So this could be a sneaky week even to get Tucker into your flex spots if you're in a pinch.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. With Myers is now going to be drawing the number 1, coverage from the defense. And if Bowers continues to take a step forward, defenses are going to have to game plan for him as well. So he can kind of be one of those sneaky flex plays when you have guys on bye weeks. And, he's a second-year player and was a third-round pick. So it's not like he's like completely coming out of nowhere. And he definitely passed the eye test, when I was watching the last couple of weeks. So someone to stash, not necessarily plug and play, but definitely keep on your watch list if you don't have the space now.
Yeah, and if you keep an eye on him and decide to watch list him, there's a chance somebody else in your league is going to figure this out. And next week too, like if he scores another touchdown and he has another 50 yards or 60 yards, you're going to end up having to spend waiver money on him. I think it's going to show up in a lot of these videos like, oh, go get Tre Tucker. And it's like, well, yeah, obviously we've been kind of seeing this role change.
Yeah.
And he's been up to the task so far. I mean, he caught the ball down the field. I think Minshew is like trusts him, and so he's looked sure-handed so far. Somebody I didn't even know who he was 3 weeks ago. So with this massive role change and with the production that's come with it, I think if you don't get him now, you're going to end up having to spend some money to get him. The last receiver we're going to talk about here is Jordan Whittington. I'm not entirely sure why he didn't get added in more places. He's only 25% rostered. Last week, And maybe he didn't get added in more places because the first week without Cup and the first week without Puka, right, when they both didn't play, he didn't play that much. 38% of the snaps really wasn't out there. And everybody was like, what the heck? This was like the preseason star. Like, get your guy out there, right? I mean, I thought this was going to be a spot for him to break out. And then a week later, he plays 97% of the snaps, get 8 targets, 6 catches, 62 yards. I know that's not like eye-popping stats, but the fact that he was out there on all of the plays, I think shows that in a good matchup, he's somebody that could be significantly more involved until Cup and Puka are back. Demarcus Robinson has kind of taken a complete back seat, is kind of looking like the number 3 behind Tutu Atwell and Whittington now. So I do think Robinson is somebody that if you've been having hopes for as taking over as the number 1, you should be cutting him to get Whittington, in my opinion. And so, you look at Robinson's roster percentage, which is way higher than Whittington's. I think they should literally switch. I think Whittington is the guy you want here. And against Green Bay, they're going to be trailing and they can be had through the air. I think this is going to be a breakout game for Whittington.
Yeah, I think he's a good play this week. He's tough. He works over the middle. He loves to do the dirty work. He's the kind of guy that McVay loves. And I think that now we're starting to see him earn McVay's trust, which is huge because we know that McVay loves to game design and scheme guys open. And when he's your guy, he could be your guy. And last week, I think he had 8 targets for 6 catches, like you mentioned. So I think we'll just continue to see this grow. Like we talked about preseason, I know he was kind of one of those deep sleeper type guys. And because the Rams were raving about him all camp, just like they were the year prior with Puka Nacua. So really excited about Whittington. He was a 5th round pick out of Texas. Amazing that Texas is still the number 1 team in the country after losing A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, Jatavian Sanders. And their running back was hurt, but I kind of digress on that one.
Yeah, they were good. They set a lot of guys out, and it's still are very good. So yeah,
crazy.
but yeah, with Whittington, I mean, he literally was in contention for preseason MVP. He got so much run when you don't see a lot of the starters getting run, and so the fact that he then has translated that into playing time during a regular season game, I think is proof that it's just wheels up here with Whittington.
Yeah.
Going down to our next position here, we're going to talk about a tight end. Same offense. So we're going to talk about Colby Parkinson here going up against Green Bay. And, he's only 25% rostered, but with how bad tight end has been, he's out there for a lot of the snaps, right? I mean, he's played over 80% of the snaps every week. It was 187 the last 2 weeks, 7 targets last week again, too. So like we talked about with Whittington, the offense seemed to kind of shuffle around a little bit in favor of these 2 guys. So this week against Green Bay, they're going to be down. You should be considering Parkinson in your lineups if you're very strapped at tight end. Hopefully you got somebody a little better like Freiermuth or Kraft off the waiver wire. But if you didn't, Parkinson isn't necessarily a bad option. And I would be playing Parkinson over like Mark Andrews, for example. I don't think that's close there.
That's what I was going to ask you. Who did you play him over? And it just doesn't really seem like, why would I play Andrews over him?
Yeah, and if like say you have Njoku that you've been waiting on coming back and you kind of missed on some of these wire guys and Njoku doesn't go, Parkinson is very much a plug and play here. So I do think that again with the shift in what we kind of saw with the offense and the playing time and where the targets went, I think that this is like a tangible change that we can see and that this week is good to play. I will say in terms of beating the waiver wire on these guys, it's a little bit tough because they do have a week 6 bye. So if you don't play them this week and then you're on week 6 bye and you have injuries and you need a guy to start, these guys are going to be the end of your bench. So you are probably going to end up cutting the Rams guys. So keep that in mind. If you do have a spot or you're okay, your roster's okay for week 6 and you can pull these guys through their buys, I do think that is a little bit more of an advantage there for picking up these guys in particular. If not, I'd kind of go towards Tre Tucker, Josh Downs, if you can get somebody like that.
Yeah, I think with Parkinson, it's a little bit easier of a spot start with a potential cut. Like if he goes 5 for 60, I don't think people are going to be rushing to add him during his bye week, and then people kind of might forget about him the week after. So I think that's a little bit safer. I think with Whittington, that's more of someone that's kind of like a 4 or 5 week play because we don't necessarily know exactly when Puka and Cup are going to come back. And I know there's always this talk of like, once they get these guys back, but there's no guarantee that once they come back, they're just going to be 100%, right? Like we see the injuries happen over and over, unfortunately. So long-term, I would be more inclined to get Whittington, but like you said, only if you can afford that bench spot as well.
And then we're going to talk about a couple defenses. I feel like this is the main topic of what people are looking for on Beat the Waiver Wire, because defenses you can avoid spending any fab, and they're usually pretty predictable for the following week. So the Houston Texans are 26% rostered, and in week 6 they get the Patriots. I think that's a very good add if you are looking to add just somebody to the end of your bench. And is a defense that has been pretty solid, so I think they're definitely worth an add, and they will be ranked in the top 5 of defenses in week 6.
Yeah, I mean, Patriots can't score, right? They've got Rhmondre, they've got maybe Gibson. I still like Jalen Polk, but Brissett's just getting eaten alive out there, and Houston's going to put a bunch of pressure on him. So I think that's a no-brainer.
Yep. And then the second defense here that we want to mention is the LA Chargers. They go up against the Broncos in week 6. And so that's obviously a great matchup, right? Bo Nix should be under pressure a lot in that game. And the Chargers defense has been significantly better than it was the past 2 or 3 years with the defensive guru, Brandon Staley. So I do have a lot more confidence in them. They've only given up, they haven't given up more than 20 points to anybody. In the game they gave up 20 points to Pittsburgh was a weird circumstance where they couldn't hang on to the ball after Herbert got knocked out with the flare up to the high ankle sprain. That's not going to be a problem, I don't think, in week 6 after they get a bye here to kind of get him a little bit more healthy, get him right. He's going to be rehabbing constantly. So I do think in this game, low point total for Denver, and I do think they can kind of get after Knicks a little bit. So I think they should be able to score double-digit points in this matchup against Denver in week 6.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, even if Knicks continues to improve, even if this run game continues to improve a little bit, neither have been even remotely good, and Chargers have allowed, on average, like the least points per game. So like you said, with what should be a very low over-under, which is kind of what we like to chase anyway, it's a good matchup. And I don't know if you said their roster percentage, but I would imagine with them being on bye this week, they're just everywhere.
They should be very available, right? And
yeah,
so the roster percentage might not reflect like an entire ownership, but I did forget to mention it is 9% for the Chargers.
Okay.
All right, with that, thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully this helps you guys get some of these guys on your roster. We did very well last week in this video, so hopefully this one does as well. We gave you quite a few more names. So if you want rankings for this week, comment down below rankings and we'll get that sent out to you guys. We look forward to talking to you in the next one.
Later.